This is the 1960s supergroup Cream. Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, and this is their fourth and final studio album, Goodbye, on which there is a song called Badge. And that song was a co-write between Clapton and Beatle George Harrison. Badge is one of Eric's most popular songs. He's played it live regularly for over 50 years since leaving Cream. But it's also unusual in one respect because, despite clearly being written about someone, down through the many years, neither George nor Eric ever came out and said who it was actually written about. I've read every book I could find, every article, I've watched every interview and every documentary, and nowhere could I find even the slightest hint of an answer. I did, however, find countless other people asking the exact same question. What is Badge about? And in the process of reading and researching, I think I might have actually just stumbled upon the answer, if there even is one. But before I can actually explain this to you in a way that makes any sense whatsoever, I first need to explain the tangled love triangle that was going on in the background the whole time. In March 1964, superstar musician George Harrison met model Paula Boyd on the set of the Hard Day's Night film. The two of them became a couple, and on the 21st of January 1966, they were married. Later that same year, in July of 1966, a new British power trio appeared on the UK circuit. Made up as they were from three titans at the top of their respective disciplines, the band called themselves The Cream. It was a cocky name, but it was also the truth. Cream's guitarist Eric Clapton was at that time dating French model Charlotte Martin. However, in July 1967, Cream played the Savile Theatre in London, and it was there that Eric first encountered the woman he would become obsessed with, George Harrison's wife, Paula Boyd. Patty was also a little bit smitten with him on their first meeting as well, saying this: "I first met Eric at a party the Beatles manager Brian Epstein gave after a Cream concert at the Savile Theatre. Eric was held in awe by his fellow musicians for his guitar playing, and graffiti declaring that Clapton is God had been scrawled on the London Underground. He was incredibly exciting to watch. He looked wonderful on stage, very sexy and played so beautifully. But when I met him afterwards, he didn't behave like a rock star. He was surprisingly shy and reticent." Eric's shyness upon meeting Patty, however, was down to more than his natural mellow demeanour. Here's how he explains that moment in his autobiography. "I had first set eyes on Patty backstage at the Savile Theatre in London after a Cream concert, and had thought then that she was unusually beautiful. It wasn't just the way she looked, although she was definitely the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. It was deeper. It came from within her too. It was just the way she was, and that captivated me. I had never met a woman who was so complete, and I was overwhelmed." 9 months after that gig, in February 1968, the Beatles, their wives and much of their entourage would go to Rishikesh in India to study transcendental meditation. This event would turn out to be pivotal for George, signalling a fork in the road for him as a person and also for his marriage. Patty says, "We had returned from Rishikesh renewed and refreshed, and yet from the time we left India, our lives and our relationship seemed to fall apart. George retreated into himself. Some days he would be all right, but on others he seemed withdrawn and depressed. And there were other women. That really hurt. In India, George had become fascinated by the god Krishna, who was always surrounded by young maidens, and he came back wanting to be some kind of Krishna figure, a spiritual being with lots of concubines. He actually said so, and no woman was out of bounds." And so, come the spring of 1968, Patty was aware that she was losing her husband. And at exactly the same time, Eric was also aware that he was losing his band. The legendary war between Cream bassist Jack Bruce and drummer Ginger Baker had reached crisis point, and the imminent collapse of Cream was now officially in sight. So plans were laid down for the Cream Goodbye tour and the Goodbye album. It was a chaotic, uprooted, stressful time for Eric Clapton, during which he had found an oasis of calm in the Harrison household. Patty says, "At that time, Eric's girlfriend was a model called Charlotte, but I was aware that he found me attractive, and I enjoyed the attention he paid me. It was hard not to be flattered when I caught him staring at me, or when he chose to sit beside me, or complimented me on what I was wearing or the food I had made, or when he said things he knew would make me laugh or engaged me in conversation. Those were all things that George no longer did." Patty was becoming Eric Clapton's quiet place of solace right in the middle of the storm, and he kept seeing her more and more often and was becoming obsessed. Eric says, "I realised that I would have to stop seeing her and George, or give in to my emotions, and tell her how I felt. The overflow from all these feelings finally put paid to my relationship with Charlotte. We had been together for over 2 years, and I loved her as much as I was capable of really loving anyone, but she was in the way of someone else, who, even though I couldn't have her, was commanding my every thought." Throughout that summer, 1968, Eric and Patty started seeing much more of each other, and then in November 1968, Cream went into the studio in London to write and record their final 3 original songs for the Goodbye album. And of course, Eric's song was Badge, both written and recorded with George, to whom he had now become quite close. Let's have a look at the lyrics. "Thinking about the times you drove in my car, thinking that I might have drove you too far. And I'm thinking about the love that you laid on my table. I told you not to wander round in the dark. I told you about the swans that they live in the park. Then I told you about our kid, now he's married to Mabel. Yes, I told you that the life goes up and down. Don't you notice how the wheel goes round? And you'd better pick yourself up from the ground before they bring the curtain down. Yes, before they bring the curtain down, get up, get up, get up. Talking about a girl that looks quite like you. She didn't have the time to wait in the queue. She cried away her life since she fell out the cradle." In his book I Me Mine, George Harrison gives us the tiny, scant scraps of information we do have about the writing of this song, saying, "I co-wrote Badge with Eric Clapton. While writing the words, we got to the middle part, which I call the bridge, so I put that on the paper with the words. Eric was sitting opposite me and he looked at the paper upside down to him and cracked up. He said, 'What's that?' 'Badge.' And I said, 'It's bridge.' So later, Eric called the song Badge. Later, Ringo came in. He was absolutely plastered, and we were up to the lines, 'I told you not to drive around in the dark. I told you.' And Ringo said, 'About the swans that live in the park.' It's a bit silly, but that's what happened, folks." And in that same book, George also shares with us the original paper on which the song was written. And there's his scrawled word, bridge, that actually does look quite like the word badge. And elsewhere, George also confirmed that they both wrote the lyrics, but that George did actually write more of them than Eric. But that is now it. As far as I was able to find at least, that is the sum total of anything either of them told us about the meaning behind the song. Just that one of the lines is a throwaway line from Ringo. Nothing whatsoever about the girl it's seemingly written about. When you go through the lyrics, they seem to read like a story. There's a girl that one of them knows quite well, who they've driven round regularly in their car and had conversations. The lyrics read like she maybe offered herself to one of them. The lyric writer seems to suggest setting this girl up with our kid. This is probably George because that's a Liverpudlian phrase. But now our kid, whoever he is married to someone else. The song goes on to tell this girl that life does have its ups and downs, it's circular, and encourages her to stop moping, get herself up off the ground, and stop crying her life away. As George said, they both wrote the lyrics, so if this song is about someone, it probably needs to be someone that they both knew. Of course, these lyrics could just be totally meaningless. They could be a made-up scenario, not about anything at all. But if they were written about something real, if they were written about a specific scenario and a specific person, the text tells us this about this hypothetical girl. It's a girl who looks like someone else the songwriters know. It's a girl who knows one of them well enough to have regularly driven around with them in the car. It's a girl that was quite forward. She offered her love to one of them. In verse 2 we see a warning not to wander around in the dark, and that sounds like there's a kind of a protective element there, and perhaps a little immaturity on the part of the girl. We also see that implication of her being young in the final verse. And from the various references to this girl's personality, we can see that this is a dramatic person, someone with very strong feelings and impulses, who has been that way since they learned to crawl. If the badge girl exists, these are the criteria that she needs to fulfill. So now let's come back to the timeline. Look at the context in which this song about this mystery girl was written. Right in the middle of this love triangle between Eric, George and Patty. And we get a co-written song by Eric and George about a girl. But is this song about Patty? I don't think so. The story of the girl being outlined in these lyrics just doesn't seem to fit Patty's story at all. But before I tell you who I think it is, we need to fill in the last few gaps remaining in this story by looking at what happened in the remainder of that year, the year Badge was released. Badge was released on February the 5th, 1969, but 1 month earlier, Eric, who was too in love with Patty to keep seeing his girlfriend Charlotte, broke up with her, at which point she fell into the arms of George. Here's how Patty tells it. I was friendly with a French girl who was going out with Eric Clapton. It was January the 1st, 1969. She was always flirtatious with George, but so were a lot of girls, and he, of course, loved it. Then she and Eric broke up. Eric told her to leave, and she came to stay with us. The French girl didn't seem remotely upset about Eric and was uncomfortably close to George. Something was going on between them, and I questioned George. He told me my imagination was running away with me and I was paranoid. Soon I couldn't stand it, so I went to London. 6 days later, George phoned me to say the girl had gone and I went home. This wasn't just a love triangle, this was a tangled mess, and that wasn't the only extra strand either. Listen to this from Eric. However hard I tried, I just could not get Patty out of my mind. Even though I didn't consider that I really had any chance of ever being with her, I still thought of all my other affairs with women as merely being temporary. I was totally distracted by the idea that I could never love another woman as much as I loved Patty. In fact, in order to get closer to her, I had even taken up with her sister. Patty Boyd was one of 3 sisters, and here they are in an early modelling shoot. Here's Patty, the oldest. Jenny is the middle daughter, and here is Paula, the youngest. This hookup between Eric and the younger sister, Paula, occurred in December of 1969, and it wasn't just Eric who was after her. When Delaney and Bonnie played the Liverpool Empire with George playing guitar, Patty had showed up accompanied by her younger sister, Paula. After the show, when we were all back at the hotel, George, who was motivated just as much by the flesh as he was by the spirit, had taken me aside and suggested that I should spend the night with Patty so that he could sleep with Paula. That is, his 17-year-old sister-in-law. The suggestion didn't shock me, because the prevailing morality of the time was that you just went for whatever you could get. But at the last moment, he lost his nerve and nothing happened. The end result was not the one George wanted, as I ended up spending the night with Paula instead of him. Patty says, Paula was then 17 and a bit of a wild child. My mother was finding it difficult to cope with her. That night in Liverpool, Eric fell for Paula. After the show, we all went to a restaurant and everyone was quite drunk and raucous. When the rest of us went back to the hotel, we left Eric and Paula dancing. George was furious with him. He was protective of Paula. And so, as you've probably gathered by now, Paula Boyd is my candidate I would like to put forward for being the badge girl. Let's take a look at the list of characteristics of the badge girl in the lyrics and see how many she fulfills. A girl both the songwriters know? Yes. A girl who looks quite like someone else the songwriters know? That's another yes. In his book, Eric Clapton literally describes her as a surrogate Patty. And Patty herself says he was only with her because she was the next best thing to me and I was unobtainable. And you can see they are sisters who do look somewhat alike. A girl who knew one of them well enough to have regularly driven around with them in their car. Yes, again, George had been her brother-in-law since 1966. A girl who offered herself to at least one of them. She laid her love on the table. Is there evidence that she offered herself to at least one of the songwriters? Of course there is, because she got together with Eric, who she was obviously attracted to. There's also that implication of a protective element, and the implication that she might be a little bit younger. And as we've already seen, Patty openly said that George was protective of her. And then we come to the lines about this girl's personality. Pick yourself up from the ground. She didn't have the time to wait in the queue. She cried away her life since she fell out the cradle. As I pointed out earlier, this is a dramatic personality, someone with strong feelings and impulses, who has been that way since they learned to crawl. Now listen to this from middle sister Jenny. Paula, even when still very young, seemed to be quite different from the three of us, much more outgoing. We were thin, shy and introverted, whereas Paula was quite the opposite. Where we stifled our emotions and held ourselves close, she was gregarious. Patty says she was so pretty, the prettiest of us all, creative, lively and outgoing, not cripplingly shy like Jenny and me. As a little girl, when our stepfather was living with us, she was utterly adored and always had the biggest present at Christmas. But she clearly remembers, even at that young age, thinking that when she opened her present, whatever it was, it wouldn't be enough. She cried away her life since she fell out the cradle. She was born with an addictive personality. Her attitude to the Christmas present was like the alcoholic for whom one glass is never enough. And as a teenager, she was well on the way to having a problem. And Paula was a teenager when Eric and George wrote the lines, "You better pick yourself up from the ground before they bring the curtain down." But if this song is about Paula Boyd, why did neither one of them ever come out and say it? Well, because Patty was 100% right in her understanding of her baby sister. She did have an addictive personality, and it seems to me like she was just born into the wrong generation, where drugs were being handed around like sweets. Her life actually was a tragic tale of addiction. If I'm right, and this song is about Paula, I kind of understand why George and Eric might have been reluctant to openly talk about it. This song, I think, was a kind of warning, a kind of plea to her to get her act together because the consequences could be dire. The reality is, she never did pick herself up from the ground before they bring the curtain down. So, George and Eric talking about this song and saying this is about Paula Boyd might have been like just kicking a struggling woman when she was already down. But the craziest thing to come out of all the madness of these love triangles actually doesn't concern any of the women themselves. As time went by, many of you will know Patty and George's marriage did come to an end, and she and Eric finally did get together. But their relationship as well turned out to be a temporary one, just like every other romantic relationship in this story. And the actual forever relationship that emerged from all this mess was, strangely enough, the friendship between Eric Clapton and George Harrison. Despite the fact that they both competed over the same women so many times, in the end the two of them actually remained buddies for their entire lives. Though you might not expect it when you hear just the amount of cheating and kind of backstabbing that went on, that friendship between Eric Clapton and George Harrison outlasted it all. If you know any elements of this story that I might have missed out, or if you have a different theory as to the identity of the badge girl, or even if you think there actually isn't one, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. A massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon as well. The link to my Patreon is in the description. Thanks to you for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.